Selling more guns in the last 3 weeks than we did in the last 8 months.
It's a semi-automatic, just like that's a semi-automatic. The rifle's not available for purchase. Don't have a selector switch for 3-round bursts or fully auto.
Get on the ground now!
I'm a federal agent.
917-110-3.
I'm a federal agent.
And within less than 15 minutes, you can walk out the front door here with a rifle or a
We're
shotgun.
banning a class of weapons that you don't like the look of just because you don't like the way that they look, because they function exactly the same. Now move this one over one.
An incident stemming from the purchase of a 100-round LCM ended in the demise of tons of innocent people, and their families are not willing to see this happen again. The Supreme Court is getting involved in the case, which could potentially have irreversible effects on the Second Amendment, or at the very least change its landscape. Let's find out what's going on in this case. The tragic shooting. On August 4, 2019, a devastating shooting took place in the Oregon district of Dayton, Ohio, leaving 9 innocent people deceased and dozens injured. The shooter responsible for this tragic event was identified as Connor Betts, a 24-year-old man. The incident sent shockwaves through the community and sparked conversations about gun violence, mental health, and public safety. The shooting unfolded in a bustling nightlife area where people were enjoying their evening. Suddenly, chaos erupted as Betts opened fire with a .223 caliber high-capacity rifle. In less than a minute, he indiscriminately targeted innocent bystanders, creating a scene of terror and devastation. Law enforcement authorities swiftly responded to the scene, engaging the shooter and bringing the rampage to an end. Betts was shot and slain by officers, preventing further harm. The quick and decisive actions of law enforcement helped to mitigate the loss of life and brought some sense of closure to a traumatized community. In the aftermath of the shooting, investigators delved into Betts' background and motives, hoping to uncover insights into what led to this horrific act. It was revealed that Betts had a history of expressing violent thoughts and an obsession with violence. During his high school years, he had even created a hit list of individuals he wished to harm. However, the exact motives behind the Ohio shooting remain unclear, leaving the community grappling with questions and seeking ways to prevent similar incidents in the future.
Blocks away from where tragedy struck earlier this morning, hundreds prayed, sang, and cried together during a vigil for the victims.
I won't be afraid. Amazing grace.
For a long time, and it's just awful. All of this is awful. It happens so much.
It's a horrible tragedy for our community.
Is to say to them that we love.
I was one of them. I'm deeply sad, but I'm angry.
There's no weapon more strong than the weapon of forgiveness.
The shooting in Dayton reignited a nationwide conversation about gun control laws and the need for enhanced measures to prevent gun violence. Advocates for stricter regulations pointed to this tragedy as evidence of the urgency to address loopholes and implement comprehensive background checks. The use of a high-capacity rifle in the shooting highlighted concerns about the accessibility and lethality of such firearms. Mental health also emerged as a critical aspect of the discussion. The incident prompted calls for improved access to mental health resources, early intervention, and effective support systems for individuals who may pose a risk to themselves or others. The shooting raised questions about identifying and addressing warning signs of potential violence in order to prevent future tragedies. The Ohio shooting by Connor Betts further underscored the importance of community resilience and support in the face of such horrific events. The people of Dayton rallied together, mourning the lives lost and offering support to the survivors and their families. Vigils, fundraisers, and community gatherings served as a reminder of the strength and solidarity of the community during times of adversity.
They have not yet established a motive, but they do believe that the gunman acted alone.
Multiple shots fired. Multiple shots fired.
On the multiple medics out here, we got multiple people shot.
Some are saying absolutely not. He was not intentional. Some say no, it had to be. I would say it's inconclusive.
On whether he intentionally targeted her.
Observed a large crowd running away from this gunfire. The officers immediately advanced toward the gunfire, and within approximately 20 seconds.
I think that should be enough thematically that you should get a pretty clear picture of what was going on here.
KCI lawsuit. In 2021, the anti-gun Brady organization funded a Nevada lawsuit against the Korean company Kyungchang Industry Company Limited and KCI USA over the company's mags. The lawsuit came after the mass slaying in Dayton, Ohio, when the far leftist slayer took the lives of 9 people and injured 17 others before being slain by police. The shooter used a KCI mag and an AR-style pistol. Since the mag held more than 10 rounds, the families claim it made the shooter deadlier, and KCI USA was negligent for selling the mags. The lawsuit starts by quoting Bill Ruger's infamous statement that no honest man needs more than 10 rounds, and that he never intended for simple civilians to have his 20 or 30 round mags. Bill Ruger retired from the company he helped found in 2000. Since that time, Sturm, Ruger & Company have continued to produce AR-15s and market 30-round mags to the public, splitting from the ideas of Bill Ruger. The company currently supports the right of all Americans to own mags of any size. The complaint doesn't mention the company's current stance on mags. The lawsuit filed in Clark County District Court in Nevada was asking for damages as well as an injunction for the defendant, Kyung Chang Industry, to stop selling the 100-round LCM. At that time, CLLs and emails to KCI were not returned. To our knowledge, this is the first lawsuit that focused solely on the marketing and manufacture and sale of high-capacity mags, Jonathan Lowy, an attorney representing the family, said. Lowy, the chief counsel and vice president of legal at the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, acknowledged there have been numerous lawsuits against the makers and sellers of guns, and manufacturers of body armor, ammunition, and LCMs have been included in broader lawsuits. But, he said, we're not aware of any that have been focused solely on the mag. Lowy said the lawsuit is not about stopping all mags under a certain capacity, but about the manufacturer's decision to make 100-round mags to market them to the general public, to do so without any reasonable restrictions or conditions, to allow and even to encourage in some ways that people use internet sellers to obtain those 100-round mags, to not screen for who would be an appropriate user of 100-round mags. In 1994, Congress passed a law banning these weapons and large-capacity mags, but the law expired in 2004. As of 2019, 9 states banned such large-capacity mags, but Ohio was not one of them. The lawsuit alleges that the defendant's LCM enabled the shooter to transform the popular commercial district into a war zone in seconds. It goes on to say that as a result of the massive capacity of the mag and the corresponding lack of a need to pause and reload, the shooter was able to discharge 41 rounds in approximately 32 seconds before being slain by responding police officers. KCI deemed the lawsuit frivolous since the individual involved obtained the mag through a second party rather than directly from the company. The person responsible for the crime did not purchase or obtain the mag from the company themselves. Instead, they received it from someone else who had purchased it. The individual who provided the mag to the shooter has now been convicted of unlawfully possessing a firearm and making false statements regarding the firearm. The victim's family filed a lawsuit against KCI, claiming that the company was negligent in manufacturing the mags used in the shooting. In response, KCI sought to have the lawsuit dismissed by arguing that the mag is a component part of a firearm. They believe that since it falls under this category, they should be entitled to complete immunity and protections provided by the PLCAA. The case was initially brought before the 8th Judicial District Court in Clark County, Nevada. However, upon review, the court determined that KCI's mag did not qualify as a component part of a firearm eligible for immunity under the PLCAA. As a result, the court denied KCI's motion to dismiss the case. In response, KCI proceeded to file a writ of mandamus with the Nevada Supreme Court, alleging that the lower court had made an error in denying their motion to dismiss. KCI argued that in their perspective, a firearm mag is indeed a component part of a firearm and should be afforded PLCAA protections. However, even after reviewing the case, the Nevada Supreme Court rejected KCI's petition. Consequently, KCI has now submitted a petition to the Supreme Court, urging them to take up the case and examine whether mags are eligible for protections under the PLCAA. They are requesting the Supreme Court's review on this matter of mags and their potential inclusion under the PLCAA. But what exactly is the PLCAA? The PLCAA Act, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, is a significant piece of legislation in the U.S. that was signed into law in 2005, and it has the utmost importance in this case. The primary purpose of the PLCAA is to provide immunity and legal protection to firearm manufacturers, distributors, dealers, and trade associations from civil lawsuits related to the misuse of firearms by individuals. The PLCAA shields the firearms industry from being held liable for damages resulting from the criminal or unlawful misuse of their products. It is designed to prevent frivolous lawsuits that seek to hold the industry accountable for the actions of third parties who misuse firearms. This legal protection ensures that firearm manufacturers and sellers can continue to operate without the constant threat of bankruptcy or legal battles. The implications of the PLCAA are significant. By offering immunity from civil lawsuits, the law fosters an environment of stability and certainty within the firearms industry. This allows companies to focus on manufacturing and providing lawful firearms to responsible individuals while contributing to the national economy. The PLCAA also promotes consistency in the legal treatment of the firearms industry across different states, preventing variations in liability laws that could potentially hinder interstate commerce. The PLCAA's importance lies in preserving the balance between individual rights and legal responsibility. It recognizes that the primary responsibility for criminal acts lies with the individuals who commit them, rather than the manufacturers or sellers of firearms. It upholds the principles of the Second Amendment, protecting the rights of law-abiding citizens to purchase and possess firearms for self-defense, sport shooting, and other lawful purposes. However, the PLCAA has not been without controversy. Some people argue that it provides blanket immunity to the firearms industry, even in cases where negligence or wrongful conduct by manufacturers or sellers can be demonstrated. They believe that this immunity shields the industry from accountability and hampers efforts to promote stricter gun control measures. Opponents of the PLCAA argue that manufacturers and sellers should be held responsible if they knowingly contribute to the illegal supply of firearms or fail to exercise reasonable care in preventing their weapons from falling into the wrong hands, which is what the lawsuit against KSI alleges too. Other controversial cases have emerged, where plaintiffs have challenged the constitutionality of the PLCAA. Some argue that the law violates the principles of equal protection under the law or infringes upon the rights of victims seeking justice. Additionally, questions have been raised regarding the extent of immunity provided by the PLCAA and whether it applies to all aspects of the firearms industry, including manufacturing defects or negligent marketing practices. This is not the first such case to pass, but such cases usually are not successful. In 2014, the families of victims of the tragic Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting filed a lawsuit against Remington Arms, the manufacturer of the firearm used in the attack. The lawsuit alleged that Remington marketed the AR-15 style rifle used in the shooting in a manner that appealed to individuals prone to violence. The case argued that Remington should be held accountable for the shooting under Connecticut's consumer protection laws. However, the Connecticut Supreme Court dismissed the lawsuit in 2019, citing the PLCAA's immunity provisions. Going even further back in 2009, 2 Milwaukee police officers were shot and injured by a teenager using a firearm purchased by someone else. The injured officers filed a lawsuit against the gun shop, Badger Guns, arguing that the store should be held accountable for negligence in the sale of the firearm. The case claimed that the store knowingly sold the firearm to a straw purchaser who intended to provide it to someone prohibited from owning firearms. However, the lawsuit was dismissed by the court based on the PLCAA's protections. Pro-gun activists' reactions. Pro-gun activists vehemently oppose this notion that firearm companies can be held liable for third-party conduct, such as mass shootings. First and foremost, pro-gun activists assert that holding firearm companies responsible for the actions of individuals misusing their products would set a dangerous precedent for other industries. They are arguing that this selective imposition of liability unfairly targets firearms manufacturers while ignoring the fact that responsibility lies primarily with the individuals who commit heinous acts. Holding companies accountable for the criminal actions of others could have a chilling effect on innovation, business growth, and overall economic development. Placing liability on firearm companies would divert attention from addressing the root causes of gun violence. People are emphasizing the importance of focusing on mental health issues, social factors, and the effective enforcement of existing laws to prevent tragedies rather than targeting manufacturers who lawfully produce and distribute firearms. They argue that efforts should be directed towards improving access to mental health services, early intervention programs, and community support networks to address the underlying issues leading to acts of violence. Another significant concern among pro-gun activists is the potential impact on lawful gun owners. Holding firearm companies liable for third-party actions could lead to increased costs, restrictions, and limitations on access to firearms. They fear that this could erode the rights of responsible gun owners and hinder their ability to exercise their Second Amendment rights. By holding manufacturers accountable for the actions of criminals, the burden of responsibility would be unfairly shifted onto law-abiding citizens. Pro-gun activists also emphasize the importance of personal responsibility and accountability. They argue that individuals should be held responsible for their own actions, rather than placing blame on the companies that produce firearms. They contend that the focus should be on enforcing existing laws and punishing those who commit crimes, rather than imposing additional burdens on manufacturers who already adhere to strict regulatory guidelines. Pro-gun activists argue that holding firearm companies liable would have little practical impact on preventing tragedies. They point out that criminals who are willing to commit acts of violence are unlikely to be deterred by the threat of legal action against manufacturers. Instead, they advocate for comprehensive solutions that address the root causes of violence, such as improving security measures, promoting responsible gun ownership, and fostering a culture of respect for firearms. Oversight and protocol. In its essence, the lawsuit alleges that KCI USA has no meaningful protocols, checks, or oversight in place to ensure that its product isn't used in a mass shooting. Even gun activists fully agree that ensuring that firearm manufacturing companies have meaningful protocols and oversight is of utmost importance. The implementation of rigorous protocols and oversight is essential for ensuring safety. Firearms are inherently dangerous if not handled or manufactured properly. By establishing comprehensive safety protocols, companies can minimize the risk of accidents, malfunctions, and other safety hazards associated with firearms. This includes adherence to strict manufacturing standards, quality control procedures, and testing protocols to verify the reliability and functionality of each firearm produced. Such measures help protect not only the end users, but also the manufacturers themselves from liability and reputational damage. Meaningful protocols and oversight are vital for maintaining product quality. Firearm manufacturing companies must strive to produce firearms that meet high standards of quality and performance. By establishing robust protocols throughout the manufacturing process, companies can ensure that every firearm produced adheres to the required specifications. This includes meticulous inspections, testing, and quality assurance procedures to identify and rectify any defects or issues before the products reach the market. Consistently delivering high-quality firearms fosters trust among consumers, law enforcement agencies, and the general public, who rely on these products for self-defense, sporting activities, and professional use. In addition to safety and product quality, meaningful protocols and oversight help companies comply with legal and regulatory requirements. The firearm industry is subject to various laws, regulations, and licensing requirements aimed at ensuring public safety and preventing the misuse of firearms. By implementing robust oversight measures, companies can demonstrate their commitment to adhering to these regulations. This includes obtaining the necessary permits and licenses, accurately documenting transactions, and conducting background checks to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands. By maintaining legal compliance, firearm manufacturing companies contribute to the overall integrity of the industry and help prevent unauthorized access to firearms. In the U.S., there are several laws and regulations in place to ensure that firearms are manufactured and distributed safely by firearms manufacturing companies. For example, the GCA is a federal law that regulates the firearms industry and sets standards for the manufacturing, importation, and distribution of firearms. It requires firearm manufacturers and dealers to be licensed by the ATF and establishes certain criteria for obtaining and maintaining a license. Enacted in 1993, the Brady Act establishes background check requirements for firearm purchases from licensed dealers. It mandates that licensed dealers conduct a background check through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System before selling a firearm to an individual. This helps prevent firearms from being sold to individuals who are prohibited by law from owning or possessing firearms, such as convicted felons or those with certain mental health conditions. Federal law mandates that firearm manufacturers and dealers maintain detailed records of firearms transactions. This includes information such as the identity of the buyer, the make and model of the firearm, and the date of the transaction. These records must be kept on file and made available for inspection by ATF agents. In addition to federal laws, individual states and local jurisdictions may have their own regulations governing the manufacture and distribution of firearms. These laws can vary widely and may include additional requirements, such as waiting periods, restrictions on mag capacity, or background check enhancements. KCI is going to be held against all these standards to make sure they truly could not have prevented the Ohio shooting from going down, and will have to prove there was no negligence on their part. Biden on gun violence. This is not the only case that has the potential to change gun laws as well as the Second Amendment, considering the fact that the Biden administration is more focused than any other on gun control. Biden's rhetoric has grown ever stronger about guns. He routinely calls for banning attack weapons, in pushing a gun control platform even tougher than during the Obama administration when he was vice president. He has been emboldened by the midterm elections, when his regular talk of gun control didn't result in massive Democratic losses, and he's expected to continue to argue for strong changes as he moves toward a 2024 re-election run, his aides say. The grief was still suffocating, the anger still visceral, President Joe Biden said, in a suburban Los Angeles community where a gunman stormed a dance hall and slain 11 in January 2023. He announced fresh federal measures to curb gun violence, but emotionally declared there must be more. The president told the crowd he'd signed an executive order aimed at stiffening background checks to buy guns, promoting more secure firearm storage, and ensuring law enforcement agencies get more out of a bipartisan gun control law enacted last summer. Biden, whose own familiarity with grief is well known, his small daughter and wife were slain in a car crash in the 1970s, and later his adult son died of cancer, touched on the everyday things he said hurt so much after the initial shock is gone. The way a closet still smells like a loved one, the sound of a laugh, the bend of a smile. The victims in Monterey Park, where 20 were shot after Lunar New Year celebrations, were older Asian Americans, mostly in their 60s and 70s. Biden said they represented a powerful vision of America. Our diversity is the strength of this nation. His order that day directed the cabinet to complete a plan to better structure the government to support communities suffering from gun violence. If the Federal Emergency Management Agency can respond to natural disasters to provide on-the-ground support, the government should be able to do the same for a shooting, he said. More mental health support for grief and trauma, financial aid for victims and for businesses forced to close during lengthy police investigations. He is directing Attorney General Merrick Garland to shore up rules for federally licensed gun dealers so they know they are required to do background checks as part of their licenses. He is also mandating better reporting of ballistics data from federal law enforcement for a clearinghouse that allows federal, state, and local law enforcement to match shell casings to guns. But local and state law enforcement agencies are not required to report ballistics data, and many do not, making the clearinghouse less effective. Biden administration gun reform. The Biden administration has taken a number of steps to reform gun control in the U.S., perhaps more than any other. One such step is signing the bipartisan Safer Communities Act into law. The act is the most significant gun violence reduction legislation enacted in nearly 30 years. The law includes provisions to expand background checks, provide funding for mental health and school safety programs, and crack down on straw purchases. President Biden has also issued a number of executive orders to reform gun control. These orders include measures to crack down on ghost guns, increase the use of red flag laws, and improve the reporting of gun violence data. The administration has also provided funding to states and localities to implement gun violence prevention programs, launched a public awareness campaign to educate Americans about gun violence, and worked with law enforcement to crack down on gun trafficking and straw purchases. Biden has continued to advocate for further gun control legislation. He has called on Congress to ban these attack weapons and high-capacity mags, require background checks for all gun sales, and close the boyfriend loophole. The Biden administration's efforts to reform gun control have been met with mixed reactions. Gun control advocates have praised the administration's efforts, arguing that they are necessary to reduce gun violence. Gun rights advocates have criticized the administration's efforts, arguing that they violate the Second Amendment. Only time will tell what the long-term impact of the Biden administration's gun control reforms will be. However, the administration's efforts have raised awareness of the issue of gun violence and have put pressure on Congress to take action. The Biden administration's efforts to address gun violence are ongoing, and the administration has made it clear that it is committed to reducing gun violence and making the U.S. a safer place. However, they do face some significant challenges. For example, gun rights advocates are a powerful lobby group that has been successful in blocking many gun control measures in the past. Plus, the Supreme Court has ruled in a number of cases that have made it more difficult to pass gun control laws. Not to mention the political climate in the U.S. is very polarized, and gun control is a highly contentious issue. This makes it difficult to pass gun control legislation even when there is broad public support for it. But despite these challenges, the Biden administration has made significant progress in reforming gun control. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.